Hello everyone! In this video I'll try to determine which civilization has the best post-imperial nightline in terms of both coast efficiency and population space efficiency, which means coast efficiency with equally sized armies. First I considered including other heavy carry units as well, but in the end I decided against it because it's somewhat unclear which units can be counted as heavy cavalry and which units can't. For example, hussars clearly are considered to be light cavalry, because their Castle Age version is the light cavalry. But what about Magyar hussars, or steppe lancers, or Tarkans, or even Keshiks? As long as there is no unambiguous definition of what is light cavalry and what is heavy cavalry, I had to limit the frame of this video to a certain unit line, in this case the Knight line in Post Imperial Age. For all cost efficiency calculations, I'm using my AoE2 combat simulator. You can find the simulator and further information about the simulation process here and in the last videos published on my channel. The source code of the combat simulator can be examined here. In this video we will cover all knight lines with cost reduction bonuses or military bonuses, and of course the generic fully upgraded knight line such as the one of the Spanish. We will not cover economy bonuses since many of them are hard to quantify and are very dependent on the map and the current game state. So this is just an isolated test of the post-imperial knight lines. Let's quickly have a look at all knight lines covered in this video, starting with the generic paladin and continuing alphabetically. So first we have the generic post-imperial paladin without any further civilization-specific bonuses. Magyar and Spanish paladins are examples for generic post-imperial paladins. Second, we have the Cavalier of the Berbers with a 20% cost reduction. Then we have the Cavalier of the Bulgarians with a 33% higher attack rate. We have the Paladin of the Cumans with an approximately 5% higher speed. We have the Paladin of the Franks with an additional 12 hit points. The Lithuanians Paladin will be covered 4 times in our test scenarios since their knight line deals 1 extra melee damage for each relic they control, up to a maximum of +4 damage. If the Lithuanian player doesn't control even a single relic, their knight line is equivalent to a generic post-imperial knight line, such as the one of the Spanish. We have the Cavalier of the Malians with an extra +3 attack. We have the Paladins of the Persians with an extra +2 attack versus archetype units, and as this is a team bonus, it applies to the Persians' allies too. We have the Cavaliers of the Portuguese with a 20% gold cost reduction. We have the Cavaliers of the Sicilians with a 50% resistance against anti-cavalry attack bonuses. And lastly, we have the Paladins of the Teutons without husbandry but with an additional 2 melee armor. Regarding the further test settings, ranged units will make use of hit and run tactics to a medium degree. We will assume equal resource worth for food, wood and gold. However, on my combat simulator website you can also find matrices for late game market exchange rates, which means 100 food equals 100 wood equals 17 gold. Lastly, as mentioned before, we will distinguish between coast efficiency and population space efficiency, which means coast efficiency with equally sized armies. Okay, so let's compute the coast efficiencies of the different knight lines versus each other post-imperial unit line in the game, with armies being of equal resource worth. So what we get is a pretty large matrix with 14 rows, displaying the 14 knight lines we are examining, and with dozens of columns, cause meanwhile there are a lot of different unit types, especially unique unit types in AoE2. Each cell of the matrix displays the cost efficiency of the respective matchup. For example, this cell displays the cost efficiency of Bulgarian Cavaliers against generic hussars. It says 3.63, which means that if we let an army of 50 Bulgarian Cavaliers fight an army of 84 hussars, because 84 hussars have the same total cost as 50 Cavaliers, the hussar player will lose 3.63 times as many resources as the Cavalier player. So in general, we can say cost efficiency values above 1 mean that the unit type in the respective row is cost effective against the unit type in the respective column, and cost efficiency values below 1 mean that the unit type in the respective row is cost inefficient against the unit type in the respective column. The higher the value, the better; the lower the value, the worse. In order to quantify the strength of the different knight lines, to make them more comparable, I decided to introduce a point system which looks like this. As you can see, depending on their cost efficiencies, unit types can get anything between 0 and 8 points per matchup. In the end, a point sum is calculated for all knight lines, which quantifies their overall strength. The higher the point sum, the stronger the knight line. So let's sort all knight lines by their point sum. Okay, there are quite a few things we can point out at first glance. All displayed knight lines have more strengths than weaknesses. All displayed knight lines with the Paladin upgrade are stronger than the ones lacking it. Even the Berbers Cavaliers with their 20% cost reduction are in most cases not as cost efficient as generic Paladins, but at least they are getting very close. In most cases, the Knightlines are cost efficient against the same unit types and cost inefficient against the same unit types. For example, all Knightlines are cost efficient versus Eagles, Hussars, Step Lancers and all unit types of the archery range, but cost inefficient against Halberdiers and Heavy Camel Riders. However, there are also a few exceptions. Whether the Knightlines fight cost efficient against Champions, Battle Elephants, Scorpions and several unique unit types depends on the Knightline we are talking about. Next, I want to point out an observation I've already discussed in previous videos. Small stats changes can result in huge changes to the cost efficiency value, and big stats changes can result in no changes to the cost efficiency value as well. One example, a generic paladin kills a single halberdier with 4 hits. A paladin of the Lithuanians with a huge +4 attack bonus still needs 4 hits to kill a halberdier, although the paladin deals 27% more damage to the halberdier than a usual paladin. So in this case, a huge bonus leads to no impact on the cost efficiency value. On the other side, a paladin of the Franks has 12 additional hit points, which barely is a 7% increase, but leads to the paladin surviving an additional hit by the halberdier, which again results in a much better cost efficiency value. So if the matrix contains some values that might seem a bit strange at first glance, always keep in mind that sometimes there can be huge cost efficiency differences between Knightlines that seem to be very similar stats-wise. By the way, since there's a lot of randomness going on in AoE 2 battles due to target selection and pathfinding issues, there is some small random noise in the matrix's data as well. For example, the Lithuanian paladins with +2 or +3 attack are of course not worse against halberdiers than the Lithuanian paladins with +1 attack. All of them are equally bad against halberdiers. Okay, now let's have a look at the different Knightlines and let's interpret or explain the results. First, I didn't expect that the Sicilian Cavalier performs that bad, but it's actually not really surprising. Stats-wise, it's just a usual Cavalier, so much worse than a generic Paladin, and if it has any advantages, then only against anti-cavalry units due to its 50% resistance against anti-cavalry attacks. But as we can see in the matrix, it doesn't even clearly outperform generic Paladins against most anti-cavalry units like Halberdiers, Heavy Camel Riders, Flemish Militia, Kammerjux or General's Crossbowmen. In some cases where the Sicilian Cavalier should shine, the generic Paladin even wins the comparison. So for Post Imp Wars, the Sicilian Cavalier is astonishingly ill-equipped. The Knightlines of the Bulgarians, Portuguese and Malians perform surprisingly similarly in Post Imp Wars. They almost exactly reach the same point sum. However, especially versus ranged units, they are outperformed by the generic Paladin. Compared to the Paladin, they lack 40 hit points and 1 additional point of pierce armor, and their offensive or cost reduction bonuses simply can't make up for that. The Cavaliers of the Berbers actually perform very similar to generic Paladins. In most cases they perform even better than Paladins against melee units, but worse against ranged units, which in the end leads to comparable overall cost efficiency results. The Paladins of the Persians with their 2 bonus attack versus all units of the type Archer, and the Paladins of the Cumans with their approximately 5% higher movement speed only have a very thin edge over the generic Paladin. The first Paladin with a noticeable advantage over the generic Paladin is the Lithuanian Paladin, with 1 extra damage, which is the case as long as the Lithuanian player controls 1 relic. In many matchups, the 1 point of bonus damage doesn't make a difference at all. In other matchups, it has a huge impact on the cost efficiency value. Now we enter the top 3, the 3 best Post-Imperial Knightlines. Third place goes to the Franks with a hit point bonus, which makes them at least a bit more durable and hence stronger versus almost all unit types, since more hit points are always great no matter whom you are fighting. The second place goes to the Teutons with their melee armor bonus. That may come as a surprise for many, as the Teutons bonus doesn't give their paladins any advantage against ranged units. In fact, versus ranged units, their paladins are even a bit worse than generic paladins, since the Teutons lack husbandry, which means that their paladins are significantly slower. However, their melee armor bonus definitely is not to be underestimated. The way armor works in AoE 2, bonus armor is exceptionally potent if a unit already has a lot of armor and hit points. If a Post-Imp champion attacks a Post-Imp halberdier, the champion deals 14 damage per hit. If you gave the halberdier an additional point of melee armor, it would still be 13 damage per hit, which only is a 7% damage reduction. If a Post-Imp champion attacks a Post-Imp Elite Teutonic Knight, the champion deals 4 damage per hit. If you gave the Elite Teutonic Knight an additional point of melee armor, it would only be 3 damage per hit, which is a 25% damage reduction. Since Paladins do already have 2 melee armor, or 5 in Post-Imp, the 2 points of bonus armor make a huge difference in most melee matchups, especially against units with pretty low attack damage, like Eagles, Hussars, Throwing Axemen, Karambit Warriors, Magier Hussars and others. In these matchups, Teutonic Paladins are by far the best Paladins in the game. And yet, first place goes to the Lithuanian Paladins, although this first place really relies on how many relics you control. If you don't get a single relic, you only get generic Paladins, which are still great, but certainly worse than the ones of the Teutons or Franks. But in case you get 2, 3 or 4 relics, they just outshine all other Nightlines in most matchups. Believe it or not, but Lithuanian Paladins with 4 bonus damage are cost efficient versus units like Elite Battle Elephants, Flemish Militia, Elite Boyars, Elite Keshiks, Elite Teutonic Knights, Elite Berserks and even Elite Generate Crossbowmen if not protected and microed really well. So to sum it up, under the condition that you get 3 or 4 relics, the Lithuanian Paladins are the only true choice for the best Nightline. If you get 2 relics, Lithuanian and Teutonic Paladins are pretty much tied for first place. If you get 1 relic, the top 3 is Teutons, Franks, Lithuanians, and if you don't get a single relic, the top 3 is Teutons, Franks, Cumans. Okay, next let's compute the cost efficiency of the different Nightlines versus each other post-Imperial unit line in the game, but this time with armies having the same size, not the same worth. We also call this cost efficiency with equal population space efficiency. Population space efficiency plays, as the name suggests, a big role when players reach the population cap of 200. Outnumbering the opponent with cheaper units won't be as easy or even possible at all if players are population capped. That's why I have created a separate matrix for this case as well. As we can see, there are some strange and probably unexpected results. For example, all paladins in the matrix are cost efficient versus halberdiers. How can that be possible? Well, try it out yourself. Take 50 paladins and let them fight 50 halberdiers. The paladins will win so decisively that even though the paladins are much more expensive than the halberdiers, the resources lost by the paladin player are lower than the resources lost by the halberdier player. And that is true even if we keep wounded paladins in our army, refill both armies to their original size of 50 units, and repeat the battle 50 times. Of course, that is only true if, please keep that in mind, we assume equal resource worth of 100 food equals 100 wood equals 100 gold, which is approximately true in earlier stages of 1 vs 1 games or in team games when trade is available. You can find matrices for cost efficiencies with late game market exchange rates here. Apart from that, I don't want to go that much into the details of the population space efficiency matrix. Most things are similar to the standard cost efficiency matrix shown before. Although there are a few pretty obvious differences, such as the fact that the population space efficiency of cheap unit types is in most cases worse than their cost efficiency, or that the difference between the paladin and the cavalier Nightlines is even larger in the population space efficiency matrix, or that cost reduction bonuses, such as the ones of the Berbers and the Portuguese, are much less potent when the players are pop-capped. But for more details, just examine this very matrix. Okay, that's been everything I wanted to share with you about AoE2's strongest Nightlines and their cost and population space efficiencies. If you have questions about the simulation process and how I handled things like hit and run behavior, army positioning and other stuff, visit the combat simulator, have a look at my explanation videos about the simulator, or feel free to inspect the source code of the simulator on GitHub. Have a nice day and see you next time!